This other poem is called Majin Mara. It's the Irish word for a mermaid. Majin meaning a maiden, and Mara of the sea. This poem is simply a retelling of a story that I was told in County Donegal in Gorta Hork by a man called Sean O'Hockey. It's a story that is told in many shapes and forms around the coasts of Ireland, Scotland, Northern Europe. In Scotland, it isn't a Majin Mara, it's a Selkie, a seal woman, a woman from the seals who comes. But I'll tell you the story and then I'll say the poem, and in that way you'll remember it. I have to say it twice. But I'll try to say it the way that I heard it first from Sean Hockey. He says there was a fisherman in this district one time, and he went down to the strand there and he saw a mermaid sitting combing her hair with her magic garment lying on the sand behind her. He says, if you steal a mermaid's magic garment, she'll have to follow you, you know. So he slipped up behind her and he lifted the garment and he walked up the strand and looked round, and sure enough she was coming after him. So he went up the rocks and he went up the field and he went in the gate and through the garden and into the yard and into the house. And after a minute he saw the shadow going past the window and she came in the door and she was standing there very quiet in the middle of the kitchen behind him. Well, of course, he says, the first time she'd ever seen a fire, you know. Of course, there's no fire under the water where she came from. And there was no first time she'd ever seen a ceiling or a window. So she was standing all bewildered, and while she was standing bewildered, the fisherman slipped out and hid the garment up under the thatch of the roof and came back in again, and she was bewildered. She didn't know where it was. Well, she stayed that night anyway, she says, and she stayed the next night. And she stayed the next night. And in the end, they had youngsters, and they had everything. And the time went on, and she began to forget about the garment that she had always been pining about. And the time went on, and the youngsters grew up. There be children running around. And came the time when the fisherman needed a new roof of thatch put on the house. And the morning the thatcher came to put on the new roof, what had he thrown down onto the street along with the old thatch but the garment? And one of the children were running about the street and came running in and said, Mammy, Mammy, the thatcher's after throwing down a beautiful piece of cloth out of the roof, and my daddy has lifted it and has hidden it in the corn stack. Well, of course, that night when the fisherman went to sleep, she was awake and thinking. And it wasn't long till she was up, slipping out to the bedroom and out of the house and into the stackyard and fishing round in the corn stack till she laid her hand on the garment. And she took it out the yard and out the garden, down the gate, through the field, down the rocks, down the sand, and put it all round her, swam away back out into the water, he says. But they say around here, he says, that some evenings that she swims round the bay singing for them. And some evenings she leaves fish for them on the rocks. And some evenings she creeps up at night to comb the youngster's hair. He says, but I don't know whether that bit of it is true or not. Well, when you actually hear a man telling a story, you realize what you read in the books about what happened, or what a writer like Yeats was trying to do when he talked about preserving some kind of vivid imagination and so on. When he talked about how a literature could bind a community to a place, because the fabric of this man's speech, the geography of his mind and the geography of his place, were all woven together, and they were all full of what we again call, in an abstract way, the sense of wonder. I mean, we keep talking about the sense of wonder. I do. I'm working in a teacher's training college, often talking about children, often talking to teachers who are going to teach, and you use a phrase like the sense of wonder, and it means nothing, really, when you say that. But when it is enacted, it is there. On the other hand, I think it is extremely difficult for a writer, be he Yeats or not, to take this pristine thing, this living sense of the world, this living speech, and to turn it into something else, into poetry, which in some ways has to be the first speech. When poetry is a second speech, it's second rate usually. So I knew when I heard that story that it was very, very beautiful, but it couldn't be touched in a way. It was itself alone. And then the story happened in a different way. Near us at home, there was a woman who was, like the mermaid, was paralyzed, if you like, in the domestic situation. Couldn't leave. She was literally paralyzed. She had a young woman with a young family who had had a stroke. And then one night something happened. And she was able to rise and walk from the house in her nightdress, hang her nightdress on a thorn bush by the Ballinderry River, and drown herself in the water. It's a kind of shocking moment in the community. And I thought about it, a long time afterwards, and I said, it's the shape of the mermaid story. So I wrote down the story again for her, just as an elegy for her. She sleeps now, her cold breasts dandled by undertow, her hair lifted and laid. Undulant, slow sea racks cast about shin and thigh, bangles of wort, drifting weeds catch, dislodge gently. This is the great first sleep of homecoming. 8 land years between hearth and bed, steeped and dishevelled. Her magic garment almost ocean-tinctured still. He stole her garment as she combed her hair. Follow was all that she could do. He hid it in the eaves and charmed her there. 4 walls, warm floor, man-love nightly in earshot of the waves. She suffered milk and birth. She had no choice. Conjured the patterns of home and drained the tide song from her voice. Then the thatcher came and stuck her garment in a stack. Children carried tales back. In the night air, entering foam, she wrapped herself with smoke reeks from his thatch, straw musts and films of mildew. She dipped his secret there forever, and uncharmed accents of fisher wives, the dead hold of bedrooms, dread of the night and morrow, her children's brush and combs. She sleeps now, her cold breasts dandled by undertow.